This is Trey, and you're listening to Us and Them. Producing this podcast requires me to be on the road a lot. And while driving, it's a podcast fest. I really enjoy listening to other people's podcast productions, and from time to time, I like to point you to some of the work that I've been digging, especially if the work feels us-y and them-y. I'm fascinated with the series put together by my friends Caitlin Esch and Chrissy Clark, the producers of the Uncertain Hour podcast, which is part of the Wealth and Poverty Desk at American Public Media's program Marketplace. The overall series is about the so-called war on drugs. And the part that I've really gotten into is where they shine their light on the opioid crisis. In particular, they've reported several episodes that tell stories from ground zero of the opioid problem in Appalachia, and how these addictions take apart lives, families, companies, and communities. But they've also found some interesting approaches for how people and communities are recovering. Their reporting focuses on Wise County, Virginia, which is just a little bit south of the West Virginia state line. And producer Caitlin Esch returned to follow up with some people she met a couple of years ago, and to catch up on this epidemic that has shaped the outcomes of generations of people now.
Yeah, it's much deadlier than any epidemic we've ever dealt with as a country. And there's a lot of debate over which policies are the best for saving the most lives. And on a very local level, you can watch this play out in Wise County, which is why we went back there. Law enforcement has been the dominant tool to deal with drug epidemics, past epidemics and this one, I would argue. And Wise County has been doing that too for years. I mean, they first started seeing opioids abuse in the streets in the late 90s. And the epidemic has morphed. It's a lot of methamphetamine right now. It's not even opioids so much in these small towns. That is all just to say that law enforcement is this tool that's been used to, varying degrees of success. And a lot of people in law enforcement would say it hasn't worked at all to stop the drug crisis. So they're starting to try these different kinds of approaches to dealing with their drug epidemic.
Well, let's back up a second. Just can you let our audience know where is Wise County, Virginia, and just give us a bit of a description of what the place is like.
Sure. Wise County is in the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia in the southwesternmost corner of the state. It's closer to Tennessee, Kentucky, and probably West Virginia than most of the rest of Virginia. So it's culturally Appalachia. It's beautiful. It's the rolling mountains, lots of trees. It's very green. To my Southern California eyes, it was just a really idyllic, beautiful place. Coal has been the dominant industry there for a long time. Lumber is also a main industry there. And those industries have gone through their own booms and busts.
Could you give any insight as to why it is that Appalachia seems to be ground zero for this opioid epidemic?
Experts debate the exact causes of drug epidemics and why here and not there. And you can look at those CDC heat maps over the past 20 years and you can see how it's moved around the country. But I think in Appalachia, you had some industries like mining and lumber and some of these physically intense industries. People worked in these industries and got hurt. So there was pain, but that doesn't explain all of it. The economy is a major risk factor for drug epidemics. That's true in all epidemics, I think. If an economy is sort of suffering locally, the conditions are right for drug epidemics to take off. There are studies to show that prescribing habits play a major role. Doctors are more likely to believe white people when they say they're in pain. There are studies that show that white people are more likely to be prescribed painkillers in ER settings for back pain and headaches, I think it was. So there are, I think, a whole stew of factors that made it take off in that region at that time. I mean, also, I think a big part of this story is the products that were being prescribed by doctors and pushed by pharmaceutical companies.
One of the things that we know in West Virginia, I think the town of Kermit, West Virginia, had just a huge amount of opioids prescribed in this one area, more prescription drugs than I think the people there could take in a lifetime. And it seems like there was a similar problem in Wise County, no?
Right. There's one number I remember. In 2015, Norton, which is an unincorporated city in Wise County, it's a very small city. I think it has just around 4,000 people, had one of the highest prescription opioid rates in the country. I think it was 5 prescriptions for every man, woman, and child in 2015. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of prescribing happening in those areas. And like I said, pain pill supplies have changed in that area over time, and it's harder to buy pain pills on the street now than it was maybe a decade ago. And other drugs have moved in to fill that void. And right now, the biggest problem for the area is methamphetamine.
One of the people that you met in your reporting was a guy by the name of Joey Ballard. And I really connected with his story. How did you meet him?
So when I was in Wise County in 2017, gathering up documents and talking to people for the stories that we were doing about how OxyContin came to market and impacted that area, I kept talking to, people I consider experts, cops, undercover cops, prosecutors, people who work in law enforcement, people who've been addicted, and asking them about local drug markets. And somebody I know told me to get in touch with Joey. He'd been busted a few times, but he had managed to get out of that life, gotten sober, and left Wise County. So I, gave him a call or a text, and he'd been at that time he was living in Johnson City, Tennessee, so about an hour and a half away from Wise, across the border in Tennessee. He was doing really well. I met him on his 42nd day off of pain pills and meth, and he was happy to talk about his experiences, and he knew more than anyone that I had talked to about local drug markets, just how it all worked, where you could get different drugs, how much you could buy them for, how much you could sell them for. He had this huge range of knowledge, and he was so insightful and honest. And so we kept in touch over the next 6 months, I would say, when he was sober and living away from Wise.
How did he get hooked on drugs?
Joey is 36 now, and he started taking pain pills in his late teens, early 20s. And he married somebody who was the stepdaughter of a local OxyContin dealer in his early 20s and got much deeper into OxyContin, and from there it just really took off.
I want to play a section of Joey's story, and we start with Joey describing that first time he tried OxyContin, the pill that he and his girlfriend, or then eventually his wife, that they got. Let's listen to it, and then we'll talk about it on the other end, okay?
Yeah. Opioids give a lot of people a feeling of euphoria and a sense of well-being. And if you crush pills and snort them, like Joey was doing, you get the full impact of the drug all at once, along with a megadose of the drug's common side effects, nausea and vomiting. Of course, today, we all know how addictive opioids can be, but back in the early 2000s, Joey didn't fully realize the risk he was taking. OxyContin was much stronger than any drug he'd ever tried. It's similar to heroin.
And it blew my mind. Like, it was such a good high. And it's funny, though, you would think, oh, well, this is going to make me throw up, let's not take it. Common sense. I bet probably the first 10 or 15 times I took Oxy or snorted Oxy, I threw up. Every time.
Soon, Joey developed a tolerance and stopped puking. He didn't realize it at the time, but he was slipping deeper into drug use, getting high on the weekends, then every day. And soon, Joey was driving his new father-in-law to a gas station in Knoxville once a month to meet his dealer.
We would drop him off at a gas station, absolutely no exaggeration, 5 minutes, turn around, drive back, he would come back with 500 or 600 pills. And I'm like, how in the hell is he doing? Like, who's he know? And it's literally just a drop off. He'd pay for gas, food, get us high the whole time, and then give us like 1080s.
1080s refers to 10 OxyContins with 80 milligrams of oxycodone in a pill. That's really strong, by the way. For example, if you get your wisdom teeth pulled at the dentist, you might be prescribed a bottle of pills, each with 5 milligrams of oxycodone. The 80s Joey's talking about are 16 times as strong. For a lot of people, addiction began in the doctor's office, after a tooth was pulled or a leg was broken. And a lot of pills that were sold on the street started out as legitimate prescriptions, resold by middleman dealers. Throughout the 2000s, before prescription monitoring programs were really common, you could visit doctors in different states and get several prescriptions. Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee. You could hit up 3 pill mills in an afternoon. Joey's father-in-law would buy hundreds of pain pills in Knoxville, and then Joey would drive him back to the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia to sell. The going price for OxyContin then was $1 a milligram, so a single 80 milligram pill would fetch $80. Eventually, Joey graduated from drug driver to small-time drug dealer. He started out buying prescriptions on the street.
So I could get a script of Lortab, 10s, say there's 90 of them. On the street, that's $900. If I can buy it for $500, I can make $400, or I can make my money back and then make, 40 free pills.
40 free pills. Joey wasn't getting rich as a drug dealer. He was getting by, basically supporting his own addiction. When he was in his mid-20s, Joey started getting his pain pills directly from a doctor. It was Lortab at the time, which is an opioid, and he was also getting muscle relaxers.
Like, I actually do have back problems. I mean, I really do. They did an MRI. They found out that I do have something wrong with my spine, like I have bulging disc and all that.
In 6 months, the doctor quadrupled his prescription from 45 pills a month to 180.
I wasn't in that much pain. No way.
Joey wasn't the only one in town getting more pain pills than he needed.
There were times that, I couldn't sell anything because everybody had something. Like, everybody's going to the doctor. If you're going to the doctor and I'm going to the doctor, we don't need to help each other.
You mentioned when you met Joey, he was not in Wise County. He was living in Johnson City, Tennessee. Had he moved there to get away from the people's places and situations that had led him to use drugs?
Yeah, Joey had managed to get clean at least once over the past 15 years, but he went back to using drugs. In 2017, he really wanted to try again, and he was just sort of building up to being able to leave. And so it was something he wanted to do for a while, and eventually he was just, today's the day, got in a car, left Wise County, moved in with his mother, who was living in Johnson City, and that's where he stayed for most of the 6 months that he was off of drugs.
I love that detail that you have in your story where when you first go to meet him, that there's this car that's in the parking lot, and you're not really aware of who it is or what it is, and kind of when you connect with Joey, the car drives away. And it turns out that the driver of that car was his mother.
Yeah, his mother had followed him because she was worried that he was sneaking off to buy drugs. And I think, he at that time he was 34 years old, and he kind of laughed about it, and he said, I'm a 34-year-old grown man. It's not fun to have your mom trailing you. But it showed she cared about him, and also that she didn't fully trust him for good reason, and she was worried about him. And I think it just that action just shows how addiction can impact parents and families who are watching loved ones going through it.
After a break, a county prosecutor is at his wit's end, trying to find solutions to the local opioid conundrum.
We can't prosecute our way out of that crisis. We can't prosecute our way out of this problem. We can't arrest our way out of the problem or the crisis.
I'm Trey Kay, and this is Us and Them, which is supported in part by the West Virginia Humanities Council, the CRC Foundation, and the Daywood Foundation.
difficult times, music gives us peace, brings us together, and helps heal us. It calms our nerves and brightens our days. That's why we're bringing you classic episodes of Mountain Stage on air and in our podcast. This is Larry Gross, host of Mountain Stage. Find something that's familiar or brand new and feel the power of live music on our website, mountainstage.org.
I'm Trey K, and you're listening to Us and Them. I'm speaking with Caitlin Esch, a producer from the Wealth and Poverty Desk of the American public media show Marketplace. From there, they produce a podcast called The Uncertain Hour. The latest series focuses on the opioid problem in the Appalachian region of Wise County, Virginia. Caitlin, I was fascinated with another person in Wise County with a very different perspective of this pernicious drug problem. Let's give a listen to his story.
It's a misty morning in Wise County in the mountains of Virginia, and I'm hanging out at a sawmill with a guy named Bucky Culbertson.
We've got a shop in here. Can you walk and talk?
Yeah.
I'll show you.
He's showing me around the sprawling family property, tucked off the main road, surrounded by hills and trees, where he and his dad used to run a sawmill, a wood shop, and a trucking business. Bucky says back in the early 2000s, they had so much business, it was hard to keep up.
Oh, it was thriving. We were delivering stuff in, like I said, into Lakeland, Florida, up into Indiana, Tennessee, Georgia. It was fun.
But times have changed for Bucky's family business. There's just one remaining employee. You can hear him in the distance driving a loader, bringing scrap wood to the chipper. It's Bucky's 62-year-old dad.
I wanted to hang it all up. My father wanted to hang on to it, and so we hung on to it partially. But if it had been left up to me, there wouldn't be nothing here.
Is it sad to sort of come back here?
It is, a little bit. I mean, it's nothing what it used to be.
What did Bucky's business in was not, for the most part, globalization or regulations. It was drugs. He couldn't find sober workers.
We can't find them at all. It's very, very hard.
When he was lucky enough to find them, they'd show up the first few days okay. But then Bucky would notice they were
falling asleep while standing up, irritable, or just not showing up.
At some point, Bucky realized they were high.
Pain pills, yeah, at that time.
Bucky had about 20 employees. On bad days, he would have to send home as many as 3 or 4 workers. It got to the point where Bucky was working extra hours to make up for lost productivity, 7 days a week, up to 16 hours a day.
But it just got to be such a headache, I just wanted to go work my hours and go home.
It wasn't just Bucky's employees who were getting hooked on pain pills. It was his friends.
It's common for most people to consume alcohol and attend parties and drink and stuff, which is what I done. And I guess none of my family have ever been on drugs, so it was easy for me to stay away from them. But a lot of my friends didn't make that decision, and of course their family, a lot of, I guess, had grew up smoking pot or, whatever. But they chose that path, and I have lost cousins and family members and close friends that are no longer with us because of it.
By 2005, Bucky had had enough of the lumber business.
Due to the stress and the liabilities and the different problems of not being able to keep employees that were sober and that would show up for work, and to take that part of the stress out of my life.
Bucky decided to start a new career, fighting the very problems that were bringing down his business.
I got out of it and got into police work.
So police work is less stressful than running 3 businesses and worrying about
It was
cash?
at the time, yes.
This is Bucky's 3rd career. When you look back at his other jobs, you can trace the booms and busts of Appalachian Virginia. He drove a coal truck straight out of high school, but then he got laid off. So he went to work in the region's other defining industry, lumber. And when that didn't work out, he moved on to another big industry, drugs, or drug enforcement. Bucky worked his way up to a job as a narcotics investigator, mostly working undercover, buying drugs and guns.
All I wanted to do was work narcotics because of all my friends that have overdosed and died, or they're living in poverty because of that addictions. It affects you. It does.
We hear later in your report that that in his law enforcement duties, he's often going on patrol, and you go out with him. What was it like being on patrol with Bucky?
Well, with Bucky and with other cops, I did some ride-alongs, and one that comes to mind was an arrest sweep that some cops, not Bucky actually, were doing. We drove around for an afternoon, and the cops were trying to round up a bunch of people who had warrants out for their arrests, all for drug-related crimes. And we didn't actually find anyone because people had moved or picked up and left. There were probably a dozen people on that list, and it's the way that they do it. You know, they'll kind of do them in batches. And we went to some houses where people had been living very recently, you know, because there was food that didn't have mold on it on the counter. So people had been living there recently without water or power. So seeing the region and some of the problem through law enforcement's eye was very different for me, and it was really interesting to see the world in that way. I mean, law enforcement often sees people at their worst or in the hardest moments of their lives. It does raise the question, does arresting someone help that person? And, you know, I think a lot of cops there have very nuanced perspective of that. Bucky doesn't believe that law enforcement can end a drug epidemic. He and others are frustrated by the revolving door that they see. They don't think that locking up drug offenders necessarily helps the drug offender or the epidemic overall.
I love the detail in the piece. You talk about him changing his facial hair and his hair lengths and stuff like that, and that some of the people in the community accuse him of wearing wigs and stuff like that.
Right. There's a lot of local lore about what Bucky actually looks like. His name is known, but his face is not. So there are rumors about his height, his weight, his hair. Yeah. All sorts of stories.
What did you learn about the racial component of the opioid epidemic in an Appalachian setting like in Wise or maybe even a place like West Virginia?
I think Wise County's demographics are more than 90% white. The opioid crisis is often painted as a white problem, but that is decreasingly the story. And other news outlets have looked at the opioid crisis in cities across the country, and I think there's a stat that from the CDC that in 2014, hold on, I might have it handy. Yeah, since 2014, the rate of drug overdose deaths among African Americans has increased more than twice as fast as whites. And then some cities like Washington, D.C., in 2014, they had 279 overdose deaths involving opioids. More than 80% of those deaths were Black people. So it's not just, you know, a white drug epidemic. That's sort of an old story at this point. But in places like Wise, it still mostly is.
Caitlin, as you've mentioned before, the system in Wise has focused on arresting, prosecuting, and punishing. You've said that it's kind of an open question as to whether that remedy is really effective.
Oh, a lot of people who work in law enforcement in Wise County would say it's not effective, that law enforcement can't stop a drug epidemic.
Caitlin's reporting shows that this law enforcement costs money, and that the leaders of Wise County concluded they are unable to sustain the infrastructure that deals with their opioid problem. In this next clip, we're going to hear how Wise is managing this challenge. We first hear from Chuck Slimp, the Commonwealth attorney, and he's the county's elected prosecutor. It's Chuck's job to prosecute the drug offenders.
We can't prosecute our way out of that crisis. We can't prosecute our way out of this problem. We can't arrest our way out of the problem or the crisis.
So Chuck came up with an idea for a new program. It's based on a similar program, one county over.
He's a little thinking outside the box for, you know, a law and order, crime and punishment kind of guy.
It's an alternative to jail.
Rather than sitting in Duffield, costing the taxpayers $30 a day while they watch TV, eat Twinkies, and gain even more criminal contacts, let's put them to work.
He calls it Wise Works. Under Chuck's new program, some low-level nonviolent felons work off their convictions instead of going to jail.
We are at a point in time that just locking up an offender, particularly a drug offender, is not going to work. Individuals who are, what's the word I'm looking for? Who are redeemable, maybe, we have a responsibility to try to find a way to make the criminal justice system make our community better.
If you drive through the county, you can see Wise Works in action. People are out fixing the pool, cleaning the river.
Most insane thing I pulled out of the river was an old Victorian-style bed. It was about a king-size bed. Frame, everything. The bed had rotten away and still had springs.
Even working the front desk at the community college library.
Wamper Library, this is Jessie. How can I help you?
That's Jessie, or Jessica Schuler. That name might sound familiar. She's the woman we met last episode when she was standing before a judge facing 10 years or more in prison for forging checks, grand larceny, and prescription fraud. I caught up with her 5 months after she appeared in that courtroom. Remembering that day, Jessica visibly shudders. She says when she found out there was a warrant out for her arrest, her whole life changed. She had to find a lawyer, turn herself in.
I was a wreck the whole time. I've never been in trouble. And the not knowing, he could not guarantee me that I would just go in and come right back out, that they would give me the bond or anything. I had no idea. And my son at the time was not even a year old. He was 8 months old. And I'm sitting here thinking, am I going to miss his first steps? Am I going to miss him walking? But I knew I had to do it. Because if I didn't, it would hang over me, and I'd miss a whole lot more of his stuff if I didn't take care of it.
In the end, she didn't miss her son's first steps. She took a plea deal. Instead of prison, she was sentenced to 9 months of work, full-time, without pay, at the library. Jessica says what landed her in this situation was pain pills. She started taking them after she graduated from high school, mostly OxyContin.
And so that's how it started for me. And then it just took off from there. And, at first you think, I have more of a willpower. This will just kind of be like a weekend thing. And it doesn't. It never ends up that way.
Jessica was hooked on pain pills for about 5 years, till she was in her mid-20s, when she finally left Wise and got into treatment. Even though she hasn't taken a pain pill in 5 years, she still has nightmares about relapsing.
I wake up in a panic, because it stays with you even after this long. But I wake up panic, and just things that I did while doing drugs, I'm still so, I feel awful for the things I've done. I was not raised that way. That's not who I am, but that's who I was while on the drugs, and they took a hold.
Caitlin, I've been to small communities like Wise, and it's clear that these places do not have the resources to address the overwhelming challenge of an opioid epidemic. And I'm curious if the people in Wise are embracing this Wise Works program.
Yeah, pretty much everyone I talk to has embraced Wise Works with varying degrees of enthusiasm. I talk to cops who like it, prosecutors who like it, public defenders or defense lawyers really like it because they can try to get their clients into the program. But this is still a law and order kind of place. And some people think that it's a little bit of a soft on crime approach. Mm-hmm. Heard that a couple times. But I do think that overall, taxpayers and the county are tired of paying $30 a day for nonviolent drug offenders to sit in the regional jail, and they are looking for ways to cut costs. The population is declining in that area. Schools have been closed and consolidated, so they're looking for ways to cut spending, and the jail seemed to a lot of people like a logical place.
Well, it seems like a good solution. I'm just wondering if there are people who might be concerned about the free labor aspect of it. I mean,
Sure.
that there's a great deal of workforce that is, well, for free.
Yeah, I mean, those are not concerns that I have heard from people in WISE, but I have heard them from people outside of WISE. And I think that that's a valid concern. And, you know, one woman who is working off a sentence through WiseWorks, she describes it as serving time on the outside instead of on the inside. So it is alternative punishment. It's not a program like drug court that focuses on treatment or rehabilitation necessarily. And it is saving the county not money just, you know, on jail costs, but also I think in the first year of the program, there was $130,000 saved in free work at minimum wage. It's not just any business that can sign up to participate in WiseWorks. It's nonprofits, it's the local animal shelter,
Right.
the community college library, the Parks and Rec department, you know, the people who mow the lawns on Little League fields and paint lines on the fields, fixing the town pool, as we say in the piece, and jobs like that. So it's not, I haven't seen anyone sentenced to work 12 hours a day at a chicken factory or anything like that.
Okay.
It's if it exists, I haven't found it.
Caitlin, the big arching question posed in this Uncertain Hour series is, how do drug epidemics end? And I guess I want to know, do you think that the WiseWorks approach might be a model that could lead to an end and maybe also lead to recovery to this drug epidemic?
WiseWorks doesn't offer much in the way of treatment, but other programs do, and other programs in Wise County that are new to the county do. And I think that there is much more of a national focus right now on treatment and harm reduction. And actually the final episode of our series that focuses on Wise looks at some early harm reduction programs that have started in Wise County. Wise County opened the first needle exchange in the state of Virginia in the summer of 2018, and we'd been watching how that went and how that played out on the ground there. So I think that the county is looking at new programs that focus more on treatment and on harm reduction as a way to deal with this opioid epidemic.
Caitlin, you and your team at Marketplace have made a fantastic series that deals with some of the issues that we care about on Us and Them, and I'm just so grateful that you were willing to speak with us today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Us and Them. If you'd like to hear the full series about the history of the drug wars and the more recent opioid epidemic, you can download it wherever you get your podcast. Or you can go to marketplace.org and search The Uncertain Hour. Our team for this show is me, Trey K, and Kate Smith. Special thanks to Caitlin Esch and Chrissy Clark, who produced the Uncertain Hour podcast from the Marketplace Wealth and Poverty Desk. Michael Lipton and Tristan Lozow wrote and performed the Us and Them show music. Mark Lerner designed our logo. The wonderful people at PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting make Us and Them possible. So do grants from the West Virginia Humanities Council, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the CRC Foundation, and the Daywood Foundation. Us and Them was originally developed with assistance from the Mentorship Program at AIR, the Association of Independents in Radio. We'll see you next time on Us and Them.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.